Hello and welcome back to the podcast. Today I'm talking to my friend and dog training colleague, Matthias and C. Matthias is, or maybe was, also a fellow European, but congratulations, just became a Canadian citizen. Welcome to the podcast, Matthias. Please introduce yourself, your pronouns, your dog, your family, or anything else you would like our listeners to know about you.
Yeah, hi. I am still European, but I'm now also Canadian. So I'm dual citizen. Luckily, Switzerland and Canada both allow for that. So I live in Vancouver, Canada, but grew up in the German part of Switzerland. And I have one dog, service dog Dropout, which brings us to my work, which is I'm the director of puppy raising for BC and Alberta guide dogs in Vancouver. So we breed, raise, and train dogs for guide dog work, service dogs for autism, as well as OSI, PTSD. So OSI stands for operational stress injury, PTSD service dogs. I also have two kids, 5 and 8 years old boys. Before my work with service dogs, which I've been doing for 7 years, I've been working with pet dogs. I started off as a dog walker and kind of things just happened, I guess. And so, yeah, here I am. I'm also on the board of the IABC Foundation. Yeah.
Nice. So to get right into that, have you been working with dogs since you've been in Canada or already when you were back in Switzerland?
No, in Switzerland, I grew up with dogs. I didn't do much with them. I went to like basic obedience classes, but the dogs came to our house because of my pestering my parents, and they made me commit to dog walks. And I did take them for walks pretty much my whole life. Even as a teenager, I remember actually people making fun of me for taking the dogs all the time. But I did not work with dogs, but I always wanted to work with animals. For me, it was never like I'm dog obsessed, I'm animal obsessed. I had any kind of pet you can imagine. I had snakes, stick insects, guinea pigs, rabbits. I was breeding fish and all kinds of things. And I spent 1 week in a zoo at some point to see if I would want to be a zookeeper. And that was honestly probably the hardest job I've ever done. I fell asleep at 7 p.m. because I was so tired. I blistered all over my hands. There was very little interaction with the animals and very little pay as well. So I was like, no thanks. I also was part of a partridge reintroduction project in Switzerland where they reintroduced partridges. So I was a field technician hunting down partridges with a radio. And we also were breeding them and trying to have the wild partridges adopt the bred partridges. And I did that to see if maybe I would want to go back to school and study biology and become a biologist. And I decided no. It's like quite boring, a lot of that stuff, and I hate school. So there was that. So I kind of put it on ice and I was just like, well, it's not going to happen until I found out about guide dog work. And there was apprenticeships for guide dog works to become a guide dog instructor. And so this was back in Switzerland. I applied to become a guide dog instructor, but I had zero experience. Nothing on my resume was working in my favor, so I didn't get a job. Funny thing is I met these people at the International Guide Dog Conference a few weeks ago, so that was fun. But yeah, so did that, gave up on it again. I went traveling and I met my Canadian wife in New Zealand. Eventually I moved here and I was a recruiter at this point for a temp agency, and I couldn't find a job. I was still talking to everybody that like, I want to be a guide dog trainer one day. I love dogs and whatever. And at that point, I had figured out that if I wanted to work with the animal, probably it would be dogs or horses. I had zero relationship with horses or experience, so it was dogs. Somebody suggested I become a dog walker, and I was not in the mood to start my own business, so I just applied to a bigger dog walking company. That's how it started. I worked there for 5 years, kind of started just as a dog walker, and then I became a manager and trained staff. And then I started doing dog training classes. I also did my KPA at some point during that time. Yeah.
Nice. So out of curiosity, at that point, could you just move to Canada? Like work there legally or?
I was in Canada before that, working for a motorhome rental company, washing and cleaning motorhomes and doing introductions to German-speaking people on how to operate the motorhomes. And I worked there for 18 months. And then my visa ran out. That was like a student kind of work abroad kind of visa. So I married my wife because the Swiss consulate told us, if you want to stay together, like the only way to do this is get married, and it gets processed faster if you're out of country. So we got married, we moved to Switzerland, and originally we were just going to stay there quickly, but it ended up to be 2 years, and then we came back.
How did you decide between those two countries? Like where you wanted to live? Because like now that you're married, I suppose that technically you could have lived in either Switzerland or Canada.
Yeah, I mean, my wife was not speaking any German. I was speaking English. So we were like, and I came to Canada, I lived there, I liked it.
Yeah.
But then we did go to Switzerland with the idea of exploring, living there. My wife has always enjoyed traveling and living abroad or whatever. So we went there. She started learning German and she studied. She went and did her master's there, but she did not enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I did enjoy Canada. So there we are.
Interesting. I have to ask you a follow-up question on this. Why do you think she did not enjoy Switzerland, and why do you think you enjoy Canada? Do you like Canada better than Switzerland, or is it equal?
I like it better. I think at this point I do. I think back then I didn't necessarily. I think it was a even Steven. I think the main thing, I think it's partly cultural. Like she did not like, as much as the cultural differences seem very small, they were big enough to cause her trouble. But the biggest issue, I think, it would have been much easier if we lived in Germany, because in Switzerland, Swiss German is a spoken language, and the language caused a lot of trouble because what would happen is my wife was very quick in picking up German, and she was very fast in being able to have conversations in High German, but she was unable to understand Swiss German.
Yeah,
and so what would happen?
Germans don't understand Swiss German.
Yeah. Yeah. So what would happen is that she would go, like when we spend time with my family or friends or pretty much any Swiss people, one-on-one was fine. They would speak High German with her.
Yeah.
And then if in a group setting, people would speak High German to her, but as soon as it went back to the group, everything would switch back to Swiss German. And there she was sitting, not understanding what was going on. And admittedly, it took me way too long to really understand how hard that was for her, because I think I was a little, like, if I supported her more there or whatever, it maybe would have gone different. But I was just like, I don't understand your problem.
Because like you're so used to it. Yeah. And to you, it's probably the same language. And
you,
it's the same. It's like one and the same language, right? So you actually have to consciously look at that and like, oh, right. It's not really.
Yeah. And I think like she still doesn't understand how weird it is for a Swiss person to speak High German. High German is a foreign language. It's like, even though we write in it, we watch all our TV in High German, speaking it feels awkward.
Yeah.
That's why, and speaking it to your family or friends is very awkward. Like you're like, this just doesn't feel right. Like that's not how we speak. So yeah, it's very complicated, but it became like, I mean, it was a very hard time for her. She did not enjoy her time there. And we did spend a lot of time in Germany, actually, and she felt just so much better over there. And I'm cursing Switzerland for its language, because I think it would have been a very different experience.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, for sure. Yeah. Like I hadn't even thought of that element, but of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like all the Englishes of the world are not as different as standard German or High German, or I'm not sure what the politically correct term is, and Swiss German are.
Yeah.
That difference is it is huge. Wherever I go where people speak English, I can understand them. But Swiss German is, I mean, I understand it partially because half of my family is from Switzerland. But like even for me, it's hard because I'm not used to having it in my daily life. As someone who studies German, I can't even imagine. Like I know that even in Austria, people have issues. If they've learned German in school abroad, they learn the German of Germany, and then they come to Austria. Every state has its dialect, and it is way less different from written German than Swiss German is from written German. And even there, people are like looking at you.
Yeah. So I lived
What
in
should you
Salzburg.
say? Yeah.
I lived in Salzburg, Austria for 2 years. And there I was obviously forced to speak High German. And there was me and a German girl. We were working there, and we just made so much fun of the Austrian accent. And she only ever heard me speaking in High German. And then she came to visit me in Switzerland, and she was like, "Are you kidding me? Like, you're speaking way worse than all these Austrians. Like, this is another level." And I was like, "Oh, I thought you knew," but I still like to make fun of Austrians for their with silly words.
No, I like, honestly, of all the Germans, I mean, Swiss German is my favorite because it is the cutest of all the Germans. And like German is like my least favorite because it's so, I don't know. It feels very, very rough and hard and consonanty to me.
I think,
Austrian German is kind of in the middle, and Swiss German is just like, oh.
yeah, we're cute. What can I say?
I
We
like
just
the language. Yeah.
we put a Lee on everything.
Yes, I love it. It is so, oh, matey. I mean, isn't that cute? But also, like, how would anyone understand that if you haven't?
Yeah, I mean, even in Switzerland, right? Like, if you like, even if my wife would understand one dialect, in the next one, like, I always take the word boy. I would say Bub.
Mm-hmm.
In German, it's Junge, and in Bern in Switzerland, they say Gio, and
What is it,
like
you?
just Gio,
Yeah.
and it just doesn't make. Oh, butter is Butter in my Swiss German and regular German, but in Bern it's Anke. Like, it just doesn't even make
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
sense.
Funny
Yeah,
that the boy is Bur in Austria, so it's
yeah,
even less like we don't pronounce the last B.
yeah. You don't write? Do you write it?
Yeah,
Well, if you were to
yeah,
write a
yeah.
text
I would
message,
write it.
yeah?
Yeah, yeah. But I
Okay,
wouldn't say it. Like, it would feel weird to say it.
yeah. It's
Like, also,
also,
like, I am not from like in Vienna. You're closest to standard. Like, is it really called High German? That seems so, that like implies like a hierarchy of Germans that I don't like.
that's I don't even know if there is a High German. Like, definitely in Switzerland everybody talks about Hochdeutsch.
Yeah,
um
yeah,
but
but
in
like, but in I don't
it's
think in English you call that, do you?
I don't know,
Whatever.
I'm
Anyway,
just translating it over, but
doesn't matter.
I don't know if anybody speaks High German. Everybody in Germany has their own accent too,
Yeah,
right? Like, I think it's like TV and writing would
yeah.
be, I don't
I
know.
mean, there are places that are closer to it, or to written German. Okay, and Vienna is closest to written German, but the other more rural states, like the one I grew up in, Burgenland, half of the letters in our words are just dropped or turned into something completely different. So it's hard if someone has learned German in Vienna or abroad. They have a really hard time
Yeah.
understanding.
I when I lived in Salzburg, I lived with a guy from Macedonia and a girl from America, and yeah, it was definitely hard for them.
Yeah. And you have the biggest advantage because when you speak Swiss German, you probably understand Austrian German and all the other Germans. And it's probably hardest for, yeah, it's hardest for someone who doesn't have
Yeah,
German.
I think Eastern Germany, I don't know if I understand.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's fair. Well, but so why do you like Canada better? What is it about Canada?
Yeah, I was thinking about preparing for this, and over the years I thought about it anyways. I think it's not, I mean, is it better? I'm not sure. It's right for me in many ways. I think my career would never have happened in Switzerland. So I was less happy in Switzerland because I did not work with dogs. Here I work with dogs. I believe I could live almost anywhere. And
Hmm.
so I think that's what makes me succeeding in living abroad. And the reason for that, I think, is that I live in the moment. I think I'm very much an in the moment kind of guy, and I don't think about what could have been, what could be. I don't miss, like, when I go to Switzerland, I'm like, oh my God, the bread's so good. But I don't sit here thinking,
Yeah.
why am I eating this I'm just finding a substitute. I'm like, I like bagels. I want to eat the bread you're eating, but I like eating bagels. So I just substitute and I just take what is here rather than thinking about the other things. And I've seen other people from other countries and they just sit here and they just are so annoyed by, like, when my parents come visit, they like can get worked up about the vacuum, which is not as good as the vacuum in Switzerland, and the door handles are not as great. And I'm like, who cares? So I think that's what makes me succeed. And I don't think actively about like, oh, it would be better over there or whatever. But there's definitely certain things that I appreciate a lot about Canada that are not the same in Switzerland. And the number one thing I think is that Canadians are just so much friendlier and it's less cold environment. Like, so when I moved to Canada, I remember the first time I landed in Canada, it was Halloween, and we went to a Halloween party. I got off the plane, I showered, and we went to a Halloween party, and we took the bus to a Halloween party. And on that bus, there's all these people dressed up. And my wife just starts talking to these people, which, like, maybe that would happen in Switzerland, but probably not. You probably don't talk to a stranger on a bus. Maybe at Halloween, but otherwise, no. Like, there is no talking on the bus. And in Canada, everybody talks to each other, although it has changed with cell phones. But back then, everybody was talking to everybody. So we got off the bus and I was like, hey, how do you know them? And my wife's like, I don't know them. And I was like, no way you had these type of interactions without ever having met these people before. And so, and a friend of mine came with his fiance and we went for brunch. It was the first day she spent in Canada, and we went for brunch, and the server came and we just chit-chatted with the server. How's it going? What are you up to this weekend? Blah, 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 blah. And she leaves, and my friend's fiance was like, oh, how do you guys know each other? And we're like, we don't know her. She's just a server. And she was just equally dumbfounded. Like, she was just like, what do you mean you don't know her? How could an interaction like this have happened without you knowing that person? A lot of times in the beginning, when I ordered a coffee, when I went to the cashier and it was a female being so friendly to me, I constantly thought people were hitting on me. I was like, oh, whoa, she likes me. And then, like, at some point I had to realize that that's not the case, and they're just friendly like that to everyone.
So
And
now
I think,
never tell.
yeah. And I think a lot of Swiss people will complain about the superficial friendliness of North Americans. And I think it's misguided, because in Switzerland, you would not have these interactions. But like here, you don't. I think what happened to me was, like, I would meet people and I would get on with them. And I was like, oh my God, we have a connection. We are going to be friends. And then I just to find out that, like, no, that was not a connection. They're just like this with everyone. And so I think that's where Swiss people get hurt. They're like, oh God, I thought we had a connection, and it's not. But if it becomes normal, then it just makes everyday living so much more pleasant. You go about and you have nice interactions. There's no expectation of friendship or whatever. You're just being nice. And so why wouldn't you not do that?
Yeah, totally. I hadn't thought about it that way, but you're totally right about that living in the moment thing. Of course, I do think about the past or the future, but not in terms of those little details like bread or something. When I'm visiting Austria, I'm like, oh yeah, this is really good. I'm going to eat all the bread while I'm here, the Vollkornbrot and stuff like that. But when I'm not there, if that's not on my mind, it doesn't bother me, because I love all the Mexican food just as much.
Yeah.
When I was in Thailand, there was amazing food there. I always find something I like. That is where I am. And I also feel like I have a really easy time connecting with people. I go places and I make friends. I don't think everyone can do that.
Yeah, for sure.
And I do stay in touch with them. At this point, my friends are all over the world because I've been all over the world. And I know they're there. I don't need them to be physically present in order to know that they're there. And that once I go back or visit, we'll have a great time again in person. That is also something I don't think everyone has that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I changed in that way. I think back in the day, I remember holding grudges at friends that would kind of disappear or whatever. And I was very much, you're now my good friend and we are good friends. And if I found anything that was looking like it was not what I thought it was, then I was really disappointed. And maybe I've gone to an extreme to the other way in that I feel like at this point I don't form very strong friendships anymore, and I just have kind of more loose friendships. And sometimes I still feel like I would enjoy more deeper, stronger friendships. Like a big cultural difference between Canada and Switzerland is making plans and friendships. So like my wife we would go out, have a few drinks, she would meet people, and then she would make these vague plans of like, oh, tomorrow let's go hiking. And then the next morning she would wake up, and in the beginning she would keep canceling on people, just like you do in Canada. We keep calling us like flaky Canadians. It would just be like, actually, I'm really hungover, let's not do that. And people would get pissed. Like, you're committing, like when you say you do something, you do it.
Yeah. That's a European thing.
Yeah, equally I struggled here. Like, I got disappointed, but like people would be like, let's go golfing tomorrow. And I'm like, sure, sounds good, I found a new friend, I'm gonna go golfing tomorrow. The next day I'm like, what's happening? We're not going golfing. That's really disappointing. But once you understand the system, I think it's fine. And I'm actually now one of those flaky Canadians myself. And I enjoy the option of opting out of it and not having to commit everything I've committed to before. But then when you do have a friendship in Switzerland, it's more intense, I think. And my wife, just at the end, she had two of those friends. And then things started looking much better. And she was like, I really like how much I can count on these friends. It's not a marriage, but you're like, we are friends now. And now we're here for each other. And it's different.
They're probably still almost friends, right?
Yes.
Yeah. The distance doesn't take that away.
No. But it would have been, if that happened earlier, then it would have been a better time for her, I think. Or if it didn't take that long to find these friends. But I think, again, like, I think it's not like you can't have these friendships here. So why here you get both, kind of.
Yeah, like I feel like I do get both. For example, it is really important to me to have those intense friendships with people who I really trust and can share personal things with. But Mexico is like that too. Everyone is super friendly. In that sense, it's like Canada, right? So you have those flow of constant pleasant interactions all day long, and they don't really mean much. They're just people being nice to each other, recognizing each other's humanness, and like making each other's day better by doing so. And like I really enjoy that. And at the same time, I do genuinely feel like it is, every one of these conversations is a potential door into something deeper. And that potential door is way harder to find in Europe, or at least in German-speaking Europe, because everyone is like more closed up and standoffish. It's kind of cold. And here it's warm. The interactions feel so much warmer. It's not an invitation, but it's an opening that people give each other. The expectation is just to have a pleasant interaction and then move on with your life. But it's way easier to make friends in this context, for me anyways, because you have that opening that wouldn't even happen in Austria, for example. You wouldn't even look the other person in the eyes because they would probably think something weird about you, right? Because that's just not what you culturally do.
Yeah, and I think the Mexicans probably would not, even apparently everybody from Ontario coming to Vancouver, they're like, oh, people are not friendly here. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, how is it over there? It's even better. So, and I think Mexico, I've seen it. I've been to Mexico, and like, yeah, for sure, it's more friendly than here. So, yeah.
It is so funny because when I first went to the US, I was like, oh, people are so friendly. That is so nice. I really like it because the degree of friendliness, even if it is so-called superficial, it did feel much warmer to me than Austrian culture did. And I felt even in the US, I fit in so much better. But people from the US feel like their country is cold and superficial. And I'm like, really? I don't think so. But then they're like, in Canada is so much nicer. I feel like there are these degrees almost of cultural openness or warmth.
Yeah, we're right at the border. So if I go to Washington State, I think they're friendlier than the people in BC, Canada. But then I visited my friends in Chicago, and I was like, oh, you're not the friendly people from Washington State. So yeah, for sure it's degrees.
Yeah, it's so fascinating to me. But also, I've traveled a lot too, and I've never been to a place where I didn't feel like I could find my niche and fit in. I think it is because there's always something I find to appreciate in whatever is around me and in the people around me. I've always found that more outside of Europe than in Europe.
Yeah. And the other thing I was thinking about is like my wife and I have a lot of discussions because in Vancouver is such an expensive city and it's a struggle. We're both working full time with decent jobs and we're living in 1,000 square feet. The kids have to share a room. And so we're always talking about maybe moving to a small town. We could afford a full house or whatever. And what we keep realizing is that I could do it. Again, I'm adaptable. Sure, I like the countryside. There's things I don't like about the city and that I would really enjoy about being out and about in the countryside. But my wife, I think she would not be that adaptable. I think she would get really bored in a small town, and she's a city person. So yeah, I think that flexibility. Do you know that book, The Power of Now?
No, but that sounds.
It's Eckhart Tolle, his name. I think he's German, but he lives in Salt Spring Island in BC. Anyways, it's a very popular book and it's about living in the moment. And I've never read it.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
But I'm pretty sure I'm living it because
Oh.
my wife has read it probably 4 times. And every time she reads it, she's like, oh, he's talking about blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, yep, that's me. That's me. And so like I can't actually claim I live it because I haven't read it. But I think from what all I know about this book, I'm naturally living the power of now.
Yeah.
And it's just been given to me somehow. So I don't know.
It's interesting. I think I have that too. I've lived in cities and in the countryside, and I enjoy both. When I'm in the middle of nowhere, there's all the hiking. It's great, and I love it and all that space. And even if there's no one here, I still have friends I talked with online, and my social needs, they're super adjustable too. I've never not have them met somehow. And I don't think that's true for everyone either.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm only realizing this slowly. Definitely wouldn't be true for my parents, so it's not genetic.
Yeah, same here. Although my mom maybe, but my dad for sure not. Not in the moment kind of guy.
I feel like there's a balance. Just thinking about friendships, like I am good at keeping up friendship. One of my best friends is someone I knew before we even went to kindergarten because our dads were best friends and they had kids at the same time. So they would get together and bring their kids. So we became friends. And she's a completely different person than I am. So we like talk twice a year. And when I visit, we do see each other almost every day because I'm there so little. But our lives have nothing in common. And still, there is this really strong sense of connection and that sense that we would show up for each other.
Yeah.
Living in the now doesn't mean that I'm forgetting about the important things or the things that are really important to me. It just means that things like bread or door handles, that is the least important thing in the world. So for me, I think, and I'm just figuring this out now in this conversation with you, so I may change my mind on this, but I think human connections do matter beyond the here and now, but that's pretty much it. Most other things are very, I'll fit in wherever you drop me somehow.
Yeah. I'm wondering, like, it's not wrong or right either, right? Like, I think for some people, they just value the Swiss traditions or whatever really so much that that's where they're happy. That's not wrong. If it works for you, that's totally fine. For example, I never set out to be a traveler or whatever. Actually, in fact, I was so annoyed by all my peers that were like, oh, I'm a traveler, I'm gonna go travel. And I was like, oh, you guys are so annoying. And it just kind of happened to me that I turned into a traveler. My plan was to have the perfect, boring Swiss life just because I had no other plans. Not that I thought it was a great plan, but I was just resigned myself to, I'm gonna have a boring office job. I'm gonna go party on the weekends. At some point, I'll hopefully find a wife, make babies. I actually didn't want babies, but I just assumed that would happen. Yeah. And yeah, that's what it was. But I think I was dissatisfied the whole time. So that's why I kept looking for animal jobs. And then eventually I just didn't know what to do because I did that partridge project and then I had no plans after that. And I was like, now what? And so I was like, an English certificate would be helpful. I can do that in New Zealand. So I took off to New Zealand. Ever since then, I've traveled a ton, and now I would consider myself a traveler, but I don't brag about it because I hate the braggy traveler people.
Yeah. Oh yeah, like the braggy traveler people are the ones who post selfies on Instagram in front of the Eiffel Tower, like those kind
Yeah.
of people.
Yeah. Yeah, and tell you at any opportunity all the things. There's a comedy by I forgot what her or their name is, but she talks about snow globes and how everybody has snow globes, and when you're having conversation with people, everybody wants to show each other their snow globe of like
Oh,
their experiences, and
oh.
you're a lot of times you're like listening to the other person's describing their snow globe, but all you're doing is waiting for them to stop so that you can go and show your snow globe and your experience. And it's so funny. You should post a link.
If you find the link, send it to me. That is such a good analogy.
Yeah.
There's something endearing about it because snow globes are like, oh, they're a cute little thing. To be proud of your own little snow globe, that's kind of cute.
It's May Martin collecting snow globes, it's called. And you
Oh,
can look it up on YouTube.
I'll look
It's
it up after.
yeah, it's very funny.
I was gonna ask or say something about something else you said. What was that? Oh yeah, the commitment thing. That's also an interesting part because it is definitely also an Austrian thing that if you say, I'm gonna go golfing tomorrow, you better show up.
Yeah.
Or you're really insulting the other person. There are pluses and minuses to that. I feel like if you grow up in that culture, you become really careful about what you commit to.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
In Austria, I'm not going to commit to going golfing tomorrow unless I'm sure I want to go golfing.
Yeah, you don't commit to anything while you're drunk because
Yes.
you'll be hungover the next day, so you don't know.
Yeah, because you'll oversleep and then
Yeah,
like that person may not be talking to you for another month or two because you deeply insulted them.
yeah,
I think I do still have some of that, but I also feel like, I mean, of course, if you have a migraine, you don't want to go golfing, and you just tell me so, and it's fine. Like, what's the big deal? I feel like there's a happy middle.
well, and actually, I just listened to a podcast with Gabor Mate. I don't know if you know him. He's a psychologist here in Vancouver, and he very interesting stuff. And he talks about how modern life is slowly killing us. And he's talking about the problem that you're doing things to please other people, and you're afraid of the consequences of saying no. You feel like you should be going out because maybe they get mad at you if you don't go out, or you've said no too many times, so now this time you should go. And I'm so guilty of that. I do so many things because I feel like I should, and not because it's really what I want to do. In that light, after hearing that, I think it's definitely the healthier thing to not commit or have the option to get out rather than having all these commitments and needing to follow through on it.
I feel like if they're completely meaningless, then there's no point in having commitments. So, like, I feel like there is a happy middle. And it is one, to be thoughtful about what you commit to,
Yeah.
and two, to also be understanding that things change and we change and life changes. So the commitment I'm making is true in the moment that I'm making that commitment because it's what I truly believe. Otherwise, I would not be making that commitment. That's my Austrian side. But if my life changes tomorrow, I may not be able to follow through on that commitment. And that is fine.
Yeah.
And if someone else can't follow through on their commitment in that sense, that is fine too. I can't expect others to be accepting of that side of mine if I don't offer that same grace in return. That's the happy middle for me.
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right. It's not like there's been people in my life that I stopped hanging out with because you cannot make plans, or other people I just know that I can't count on it. So I only make plans that if they don't follow through, they're not gonna be detrimental to me or whatever. But I'm not gonna book a holiday with them because they might not show up. For sure, there's a happy middle ground. I would consider myself successful in life, and I think part of that is the fact that I will show up when I said I show up.
Yeah. Hey, you showed up. I was late. So like be on time. That's also something really funny. In Austria, you have to be on time. If you're 5 minutes late, that is a big insult. In Mexico, if you're 10 minutes late, you're probably early because the other person is going to be 2 hours late. So I have learned that this is one part I can't shake that Austrian mannerism of being on time and expecting others to be on time. I've become more flexible. Half an hour, that's all right. I know to bring a good book when I'm making plans with Mexicans because they may be half an hour late. But if I learn that you're one of those 3 hour late people, it's not going to work. We're not going to be friends.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I went into that medium or in the middle as well, because it caused me a lot of stress and I was getting frustrated with the Canadians not showing up on time or whatever.
You take it personally because you're taught in the European culture that it is personal.
Yeah.
It's not at all. It's just cultural.
Yeah. And now I hate to admit, but I am late probably too often. Not much though. It's still not. It's not half an hour. There's one story where there was a Thanksgiving dinner. We were pretty young, so all the females, ladies, whatever we want to call them, they were making dinner, very traditional.
Very traditional.
And the guys went golfing. I'm not a golfer.
Like golfing a big thing in Canada? I only used that example because you had used it earlier.
I used it because everybody goes golfing, but I'm not.
I had no idea it was such a thing.
It is, yeah, I would say it's a thing. So they all went golfing. I wasn't really in their clique or whatever. The plan was for the guys to join the girls at 7 p.m. And so I was like, I am not going to show up there on time because I will be the only guy.
And they will eat you alive.
I was pacing in the apartment, looking at the clock. And then at 7 o'clock, I left the house and I was the first one to arrive. I was like, how is this possible?
Yeah. It is so funny. I used to get so stressed out when I was being late, even by 5 or 10 minutes, because I was afraid of insulting the other person. Living abroad has taught me to relax way more about that. Now I don't even think about it anymore. When I just told you, oh, wait, I just remembered I had to run down and feed the parking thing so my car wouldn't get towed when we were about to start podcasting. And I was like, oh, I'm probably going to be a few minutes late.
Yeah.
In the past, realizing that would have made me feel anxious because in Austria, that's a big insult.
Yeah.
I don't even think that way anymore.
And in the past, I probably would have said here, I was like, seriously? You couldn't think of putting that? And I was just like, whatever. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I'm still usually no more than 10 minutes late. Now I'm like sometime between 10 minutes early and 10 minutes late. I don't really plan around being there exactly on time anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
I still make plans with people who are also sort of in that range.
Yeah, no, I do think you need to be on the same page. Otherwise, it doesn't work. My Macedonian ex-roommate and his friends, we had a birthday party that it was a couple, a girl from the US and he was from Macedonia. She organized this birthday party for him and she told all his Macedonian friends, she was like, I know you're always late, but please, this time, can you just show up at 8 o'clock? And she was like, just pleaded with them so much. They showed up at midnight or 11 p.m. or something. Like, it was ridiculous. We sat around for hours waiting for these people. And I was just like, that's not cool.
Yeah. That reminds me, I have no sense of time. So it's probably a decade ago or something. I also lived in Mexico, in Puebla, and I taught German as a foreign language for Volkswagen. They have a big company there where they're producing cars. I had just found a place to move into. And I made friends with my students, not with my colleagues, because all the colleagues were German. And like, except for one who was Costa Rican and spoke perfect German and also taught German as a foreign language. And we became roommates in that apartment. Yeah. So we were moving into that place. And I had already connected with my Mexican students who were all kind of my age at that time. And I told them, oh, I'm going to do that apartment thing. And they were like, oh, we're going to come help you. When should we be there? And I'm like, great, I'll buy some beers and we'll make spaghetti. And of course, they were 3 hours late. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh, I guess they're not coming. But they all did come. They just came on Mexican time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had a great time. But I was like, okay, these people actually do want to show up for me. They do want to help me. It's just that they have a different cultural norm around what it means to be somewhere at 7 p.m., for example.
Yeah, it's not wrong. It's not right. Although 3 hours seems wrong to me.
Like, it does to me too still. I'm still struggling with how do you get anything done?
Yeah.
But I think the thing is, if you all share the same understanding, like 3 is just a metaphor for 6. And if everyone agrees on that, then you don't have a problem. It's just that in the German-speaking world, we would say, let's meet up at 6. And in Mexico, we'd say, let's meet up at 3. And still everyone would show up at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what bugs me or has bugged me in the past is if I know somebody can do it for work, but they can't do it for friends.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
had a friend growing up, we're actually still really good friends. Even then, he was making a good career for himself. And I know he was on time for work. He wouldn't be able to have a career
Yeah.
in Switzerland if you didn't show up on time. But for his friends, they were always late. And I was just like, you can do it. You showed us. Why can't you do it for me?
Yeah.
It does, in a way, show you some, what do you call?
Disrespect.
Yeah, yeah,
I agree. If someone does it for work, but not for me, it feels as if work is way more important than I am.
yeah,
And I put human connections above work, even though I love my work with all my heart. If I need to drive you to the emergency room, drive you to the emergency room and be late for a class I'm running on Zoom or something.
yeah.
Of course, I'm not going to be on time for the Zoom class and let you bleed out in the street, obviously. Also, with less extreme examples, it feels weird to me when someone is on time for work and not for friends. But in Mexico, for example, people are not on time for work either.
Yeah, that's just how it is. But yeah, a double standard can change the whole situation.
Yeah.
But again, still one of my best friends. I can be forgiving.
There's some lessons about personal growth in there for you, for sure.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you about becoming Canadian.
Yes, so that happened Tuesday last week. I put it off for a long time, mostly because I hate paperwork.
Understandable.
The paperwork for permanent residency, I'm being overly dramatic, but it was traumatizing to me. Even though probably my wife did most of it. She's always like, why you didn't even do it? I had to assist, which was enough. Anyways, I put it off and I finally done it. And I done it for just logistical reasons. Because if I were to ever leave Canada for more than 6 months, I would have to reapply to become a permanent resident. So I couldn't just come back. And my kids are Canadian and Swiss, and my wife is Canadian. So they could come back and I couldn't join them. So that would be pretty bad.
Yeah.
Also, when I go to the States, I have to get a special visa. I have to go in, talk to them, do fingerprints and all the things, and pay $7 every 3 months, not every time I do it.
Are you not part of the ESTA? Is Switzerland not
I
part of it?
am, but still, I don't know why. Don't ask me why.
I think mine is good for 2 years.
Oh, yeah, actually, they've changed it now. Now it's good
Oh.
for no, it's not, because they told me in September I need a new one.
Maybe,
Anyway,
maybe it depends on the country we're from or something. I don't know.
yeah. Yeah, Switzerland is not in the EU, right? So
Oh, maybe it's different for you. Yeah.
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 Yeah, but we do have ESTA. I don't know. Either way, it's complicated. So that was the main reason. But what I found really interesting is that when it came to it, once it became closer to it, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to be Canadian now, I realized that it actually has quite a bit more meaning than I was willing to give it. I don't really care about nationality. I've never been a proud Swiss person.
Yeah.
I don't follow a lot of Swiss traditions or whatever. But I do think at this point, I think I struggled for a while with not being really able to identify with Swiss people as much as with Canadians. As I said, the way I behave and think is probably more Canadian than Swiss at this point.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I was just realizing that actually it feels really good, not just because I don't have to do the paperwork at the border, but I'm actually it kind of solidifies my identity. Again, I don't think of it much, but I am neither Swiss nor Canadian. I'm both. And now it's official.
Yeah.
Before, I would feel the need if somebody's like, oh, here's Matthias, he's from Canada or he's Canadian. I was like, no, I'm Swiss. And I don't know why I felt the need to correct people.
Yeah.
It just wasn't right. And now I can just relax and I'm like, okay, I'm Canadian.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, that is interesting. I've only ever had Austrian citizenship, but I don't like saying that much.
I wouldn't either.
Yeah. I find it harder to connect with Europeans in general than with people from any of the Americas. Germans are the hardest. German-speaking Europe in general is the hardest, but of the German-speaking Europes, Germany is definitely the most difficult, and English-speaking Europe is the easiest. Eastern Europe also easier than Western Europe for me. I feel like I fit in way more here or in any of the Americas that I have been in than in Europe. That's why I don't like it when people can tell by my accent that I'm from a German-speaking country. English native speakers know that I'm from a German-speaking country. When I speak Spanish, people assume that I'm from the US because most foreigners here are from the US. They think I'm from the US and have a really good accent because I don't have a US accent.
Yeah.
But like they can tell that I'm a foreigner. So the assumption is just from the US. And I prefer that assumption over the assumption that I'm German, which is always the go-to, of course, because that's the German just has a larger population. So you're obviously German if you have a German accent. Yeah. You're not Swiss or Austrian.
Yeah.
I would like for people to not be able to tell when I speak English that I'm not from a country that speaks English natively. With Spanish, if my grammar gets to that point, I think I can pull it off because we have the same r in German. Yeah. But with English, I don't think I'll get there.
Yeah. Yeah. Just reminded me that when I went to English school in New Zealand, I was always really good in English. So I went there. I mean, my English still wasn't great when I went to New Zealand. But basically in my head was making fun of all the Swiss students. There were lots of Swiss students there about their accents. I was like, oh my God, they sound so Swiss. This is ridiculous. And I had no idea that I was speaking just like that. I thought I had no accent. And so I did the oral exam and they gave me all these minus points. And I was like, why? And they were like, because your accent is so strong and we have trouble understanding you. And I was like, I have an accent? Like, what do you mean? Your accent is really strong. And I just was mind-boggling to me. And then I got really annoyed by that. Like once I knew, and people would be like, "Oh, where are you from?" And I was like, "Oh, that means I still have an accent." Yeah. And so I was like, "I'm from Vancouver."
You don't have a strong accent.
And not anymore, I think. I think it's much better, but I know that I still have an accent.
Yeah, a native speaker could tell, but someone who's not a native speaker would not be able to tell, I don't think.
Yeah, no, it was way worse. I wish I had a recording too, so that I could hear it, but yeah, it's I remember being so annoyed by people detecting my accent and then having to talk about it
all the time. And then they're like, oh, I know this one person from your country. Let me introduce you. And I'm like, why do you think I left this country?
And as a Swiss person, you always get like, oh, my friend is Swedish, or I have this Swedish thingy thing. And I'm like, nah, not the same country.
I get that with Australia. Here.
Australia,
yeah, when I speak Spanish, because then I'm not speaking English, so they don't know. They can just tell that I'm not a native Spanish speaker. And once it's established that I'm not from the US, and they ask me, I'm from Austria. Oh, Australia. It's like, no.
Yeah. And I was always making so much fun of people that didn't know the difference between Switzerland and Sweden. But then at some point I had to admit to myself that my geography is like, I was not a good student. My geography, history, like I'm so bad. And like anything in North America, I have no clue. And so I know the difference between Sweden and Switzerland because I grew up in Switzerland, but otherwise I would not. If I grew up in the US, I would be that person.
Yeah, me too. Like I realized that too. Austria, for example, the reason I know the European countries is because I grew up in Austria and Austria is tiny. So of course you know all the countries.
Yeah.
That are around you because you're so insignificantly small. And I think that's I mean, like same with Switzerland, right?
Yeah, I was just saying it's way bigger than Switzerland, at least. Switzerland.
But like, I think Switzerland is more well known than Austria. Yeah, because you have Geneva and
because it's better.
I mean, you might argue that. Like, it's pretty. I think it's prettier. And
I've come to appreciate things in Austria for sure.
I like the Swiss German accent. I mean, it is prettier. I do think it's prettier language-wise and nature-wise, partly. But it's so fucking expensive.
Yeah.
I don't know how Vancouver compares to Switzerland.
Well, if it wasn't for the currency difference, Vancouver probably is almost the same, but Swiss franc is so strong that we went back there last year and it was just mind-boggling. And actually in Vancouver, the inflation is much higher than, or in Canada, it's much higher than in Switzerland. So we were surprised how lots of prices are still the same in Switzerland versus here they've gone up quite a bit, but the exchange just was really difficult.
Yeah.
Well, I have very generous parents, so I didn't feel much of it, but
that is always an advantage.
Yes, and my parents' house is walking distance to Germany, so we just went to
Oh,
Germany. It's way cheaper.
walked to Germany.
Yeah, yeah. We could do a whole podcast on border police and crossing the border as a youth from Switzerland to Germany. There's lots of good.
Oh, right. Because you're not in, I keep forgetting that, of course, you're not in the EU, but like it's still EU.
Well, no, they did remove the border, but there's still border police. They removed the border when I was, I think, 17. So as a 16-year-old, we had to get over there. And so because my hometown is very small, but there's a big city in Germany, we would restaurants, bars, everything. You go over there. Yeah, lots of interesting stories, but maybe
And you
not to
needed to
share.
bring your passport when you were 16.
You have ID. It's just an
Yeah.
ID. Yeah.
That's kind of funny, like to just go out in another country just for an hour or two.
Yeah, I almost got arrested for an illegal border crossing once because I didn't realize that I was jumping over a border fence. So I climbed the border fence and then they came. It was all on video. But once they realized I was just an innocent idiot, they let me go. But I was like the hand on the wagon with a
Wow.
shepherd barking at me through the window, and they were like, "What are you doing? Illegal border crossing!" And I was like, "Oh my god, what is happening?" I was shaking, and then they sent us off. It was like at a lake festival, so we were at this lake festival. We walked from Switzerland to Germany, and then we lost our wristbands. So to get back, we tried this other way and we found a fence and we're like, yeah, that should be the right direction. Jumped over the fence and then, yeah, there was the border fence.
Did you almost get arrested in Switzerland or in Germany?
In Switzerland. And by almost get arrested, I mean, they did look at our ID and they checked whether we had previous crimes or whatever.
Wow.
But they realized, I think mostly those were border agents. We were like, shaking, me and my buddy, and then they sent us, they were like, it's fine, you can go. We walked away and they're all laughing. They're just like, look at, we scared the bejesus out of this 16-year-old kid.
It's probably like the lake festival is probably the highlight of their year at that border crossing.
Yeah, I actually went back last year. I was there for the lake festival. We tried to make it as fun as back in the day, but
and you did not get arrested this time, not even almost.
No, I was very excited to go, and it was a little disappointing. I'm not 16 anymore, yeah. Apparently.
Time tends to pass.
Yes.
Well, and again, we're going to run out of Zoom time in 7 minutes. Was there anything else we wanted to definitely touch on?
I don't have the list in front of me that we had, but I think, I don't know, I feel like if we talk much longer, we might bore people about.
Yeah. So like, let's wrap up at this point and just pick up the conversation and go into dog training territory some other time.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Cool. So if people want to get in touch with you, if people are looking for a guide dog trainer, want a puppy raise, guide dog puppy in Vancouver, what should they do or where can they find you? Yeah, so for any of our service dogs, there's huge wait lists. A lot of times the wait lists are closed. I think most of them are closed right now. So the homepage is bcanalbertaguidedogs.com. So you can go look at there. We do need lots of puppy raisers. So if you're in the area, Vancouver, Victoria, or Calgary, please get in touch or we can talk about that. And yeah, if you, I'm not on Facebook much, but Facebook for me is about dogs. So it's my dog community. So if anybody is into dogs and wants to add me on Facebook, that's fine, or welcomed, not just fine. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll put all of those in the show notes and maybe someone is going to reach out to you. Sounds good. And otherwise, they probably will next time after actually talking about dogs. I'll try to be on time if we do get there. Goodbye to our listeners. Nice. Thank you. Whatever.